I'm Bishop Graham Cray, a former chairman of Greenbelt, and I've been given the title, How Rock and Roll Still Saves My Soul, to explain my first seminar at Greenbelt on contemporary music was in 1976, hence the title I've been given. So this is the summary of the relationship between the Jesus I love and the music I love, expressed in the choice of 10 artists and albums. The church introduced me to Jesus, popular music helped me to know myself, and all that follows has been about integrating the two and making the discovery that the fingerprints of God are all over the music scene. So to begin, number one, Aretha Franklin's live gospel album, Amazing Grace. The only possible place to start. Allowed one album on a desert island, it would be this one. Aretha's music reminds me of the profound influence of gospel music and the music of the black church on the history of popular music. Gospel is good news in hard times. It finds in faith a sustaining during the hardship of life. And the best popular music is still shaped by this, even when it has absolutely no idea about its origin. It does the same. Number two, Allman Brothers Band live at the Fillmore East, because gospel's twin sister, born out of the same music of redeemed slaves, is blues. Blues is times are hard, but I'm not giving up. It reflects the resilience of the human spirit created in the image of God, yet faces into the fallenness of the human condition. It's real. I learned my blues from white bands who learned it from the originals, and the Allman Brothers Live is a classic, and that tradition continues. I warmly recommend their offspring, called the Tedeschi Trucks Band, led by the nephew of one of the guys on my album. Number three, Kate and Anna McGarrigle by You'll Never Guess Kate and Anna McGarrigle. It wasn't only the black church which fed its music into the popular music of the second half of the 20th century. Church and folk harmonies from Europe crossed the Atlantic, and it all fed into the mix. I love harmony singing, Beach Boys to today. And no one did it better for me than the McGarrigles from Canada, and sadly Kate died earlier this year. Just listen to Travelling On for Jesus, or Talk to Me of Mendocino, beautiful harmonies and the echoes of the church from a previous age. Well, you two had to be there. Couldn't choose between the Joshua Tree and Achtung Baby, so they're both there. Why, in one moment of Greenbelt celebrity glory, 1981, I took a phone call. It was Bono. They had been praying. They believed the Lord wanted them to play Greenbelt the next day. But we had to say quickly because they had to convince Adam. You two were the band that made it possible to celebrate faith and spirituality in the world of white rock. Bob Marley's songs about God were acceptable. Bob Dylan's were frowned on. You two changed that. They make me want to dance in worship as part of a gig. And at the end of the Achtung Baby tour, it was a privilege to lead a joint seminar in the Big Top with Willie Williams, the show designer. Now, I have to have a guitar hero. Mine, for the more than 4 decades, has been Richard Thompson. Shoot Out the Lights is the last album he made with his first wife, but I could have chosen lots of his solo albums. Beautiful songs, quite unbelievable guitar playing. Sometimes there's a bleak outlook, though he's more cheerful than his songs sometimes sound. But as a Sufi Muslim, he's a believer in God, and a believer that believing in God has moral consequences. Number 6, Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds. I'll go for the Boatman's Call. You see, any album which begins like this, I don't believe in an interventionist God, but I know, darling, that you do. But if I did, I'd kneel down and ask him not to intervene when it comes to you. Just had to have me hooked. Cave is an Australian ex-choir boy who has remained fascinated with the Bible, moving on from a focus on the Old Testament, a song called The Mercy Seat, to a fascination with Jesus in Mark's Gospel that came because he talked with a young priest. He explores spirituality, and he thinks we've tamed Jesus in the church. And it just may be that he's right, because prophecy sometimes has to come to the church from outside. Recommend a song from another album called God Is in the House. Bruce Koban had to be, chose Big Circumstance, but it could be any of half a dozen other albums. One of my best gigs ever. Big top, Greenbelt, one man I'd never heard before, stands with his guitar and sings, "Sun Comes Up," looking like the eye of God. And I was hooked. Another great lyricist and guitarist, writing from a spiritual perspective, clearly informed on one stage at least by Christian spirituality, and integrating spirituality and justice seamlessly as they were made to be. Number 8, Radiohead. I've loved Radiohead since the Bends. The song Fade Out Street Spirit is bleak lyrically, yet hopeful musically. It's like a postmodern blues. My favourite just is In Rainbows, with songs like Videotape. Guitarist Ed O'Brien once said about Radiohead's music, it's about wanting to be somewhere else. There is something in the human spirit, made in the image of God yet fallen, which says it didn't ought to be like this, and longs for something more, something better, something beyond. So for me, the best of Radiohead and the evocative singing of Tom York are like secular psalms that say, "How long, Lord?" Number 9, Bon Iver, by Bon Iver. There's a sort of secular transcendence in some music at the moment. It's there in Fleet Foxes, whose leader, Robin, who was raised an atheist, sees no reason to be God, but is almost awestruck by nature, and some of that being awestruck comes out in the harmonies. It's there in Bon Iver, this album in particular, and others. Has no particular religious faith, but a sense of beauty and awe comes through this music. Here's a non-believer's music I can worship to. His real name is Justin Vernon. He said, completely devoid of any religious or iconic context, I felt that music was handed down to me. Actually, he's not totally, completely devoid of any religious context, because he was a religious major at college, and he discovered he could sing beautiful falsetto through trying to sing a Mahalia Jackson gospel song. Gospel sneaks in everywhere without you noticing it. People are made for transcendence, even if they don't believe in the source of it. And music is a gift from God, even if you didn't know who gave it to you. So to conclude, utterly ridiculous 10 albums. So I went to a favourite of a year or two ago, Robert Plant's Band of Joy. The best music moment for years for me was a few moments in Jools Holland's Later. The show included Arcade Fire, who I could easily have chosen instead of Radiohead. It included Mavis Staples, who I could easily have put in instead of Aretha Franklin. There's Robert Plant and a band led by Buddy Miller, who himself has taken part in Greenbelt, a devout believer in Jesus. Song was almost totally a cappella, a tiny little bit of instrumentation. Satan, your kingdom must come down. Satan, your kingdom must come down. I heard the voice of Jesus crying, Satan, your kingdom must come down. I couldn't have put it better myself. God's fingerprints are still all over the music scene, and that sort of rock and roll still saves my soul. Amen.